Hello and welcome to Fearless Authenticity with Jeanne Sparrow. This is my podcast on what it looks like when we find the success of who we truly are and the gifts we have to share with each other. These are conversations with people who know what that looks and feels like in the hopes that it will be an inspiration to all of us to find more ways to make our dreams come true, follow our passions, and serve in the way we were created to. Now, as I always say, I hope this gets deep because that's where we find the good stuff, but don't get it twisted. It's also about the fun in life, because if it ain't fun, it ain't worth doing. So let's be brave, be free, be you together. My guest today is one of my favorite people. She is a sommelier, a lifestyle expert, experiential storyteller, host, and on-camera personality and entrepreneur. She has worked at the institutions of fine dining and wine across the United States. Charlie Trotter's in Chicago, the Fifth Floor in San Francisco, the Modern in New York City, with international brands like Moet Hennessy, Champagne Taittinger, and St. Regis Hotels. She is a fixture on global media, the New York Times, Bloomberg, Food and Wine, CNBC, MSNBC, as well as a published wine writer whose work is in cookbooks, newspapers, and magazines. She was recognized by the Wall Street Journal as the global virtual wine experience guru and is still the only woman of color to win a James Beard Award in a drinks category. She now creates the buzziest industry events and bespoke experiences for Fortune 500 clients. Her specialty is making epic moments, everyday occurrences for everyone through approachable luxury. It's one of my favorite things about her. I am honored and so pleased to welcome my friend Belinda Chang to the Fearless Authenticity podcast. Hey, gorgeous.
Hello. Gosh, I'm so honored and pleased to be here with you, the Jeanne Sparrow.
Ma'am, I am honored because you and the way you have transitioned your business and things through navigating many difficult moments in life, including but not limited to the pandemic. Ma'am, you have so much to share with people, and I can't wait for us to talk about it.
Yeah, fearless. I'm just going to put that word out there. I think it's probably on screen somewhere, fearless.
Yes, and it is the epitome of who you are. Now, I know your story and how you found your way to your career, and I feel like it is the epitome of both fearlessness and authenticity. And I feel like for you, it was really about what was choosing that was right for you, no matter what anybody else said, thought, or encouraged you to do. Can you share whatever parts of your story you choose to share, but especially for me, like your story about how you chose fine dining, I think is kind of, at the core of taking that leap.
Yeah, I come from a family of Taiwanese immigrants. Both my mother and father came to the U.S. to go to school, and then, kept going, found each other, got married, popped me out, my brother out. But I think what was interesting about our upbringing is that we really were about bringing our culture to others and also continuing to be connected to our culture through dinner parties. My mom was an excellent chef. I learned what mise en place was from watching her get ready for wok stir frying and a la minute, in the minute cooking, 9-course menus, all of sort of Taiwanese and Chinese classics for our guests, which were either visiting students from Taiwan or from China or from Asia, or just perfect strangers. I don't know how these people wandered to our house, but there was a dinner party almost every night, Jeanne. And guess what I was in charge of? You might be surprised to learn, or not surprised. The Sprite with the orange juice from Continental.
Yes!
That cocktail, that was me. I loved it. I loved the hospitality. I loved having a community together at our table. I loved just all the feels you get from when your house smells great and there's laughter and there's learning and there's connecting and there's community. All of that came together at a table. So when I went to college in Houston, Rice University, before which I went to the Illinois Math and Science Academy. Thank you, taxpayers of Illinois, for that experience. I continued that. I was the one who hosted Melrose Place Mondays at my off-campus apartment, pardon me, and everyone came to dinner, and I was cooking from Gourmet Magazine and from Food and Wine Magazine and Bon Appetit Magazine, and just having the best time, and maybe not paying so much attention to my biochemistry studies, although I did make it through. But I think I realized through all of that what I really loved was being a part of and hosting, like you, an experience for friends and for family and also for strangers. So that took me to, remember the Wine Spectator magazine? Not remember, it's still actually one of the few magazines still in print being published. One day when I was in Houston in school, I was at a Barnes and Noble or some bookstore. Remember when we had lots of those?
Lots of them.
Lots of them. I saw a cover of the Wine Spectator, which is, was It magazine for luxury, really, that said the best food and wine experience on earth is at Charlie Trotter's restaurant in Chicago. So I thought, if I'm going to do this whole thing, I should apply there. And so I did. So she did.
Now, did your parents, because I remember you telling me that even though your parents had this hospitality mindset, they didn't necessarily see it as a way of making a living. Like you, I mean, I'm not going to call your mom a tiger mom because that would be too, she was. But it's like math and science and chemistry and all these things. And that's what you got your degree in. What was that conversation like for you when you made the choice you did professionally?
Oh, it was so painful. I mean, they both have advanced degrees. My father has a PhD. My mom has a master's in library science. My brother has a PharmD and now directs commercials for drugs. So, if the people look too happy, that's his fault. So, they really assumed that that's the path I was going to go on, right? A lot of people have heard this story as children of immigrants. We came here to make a better life for you. And the way you're going to do that is by school.
Being a doctor, a lawyer, be something professional.
Ton of school, and then you're going to do one of these two things. And I just really, I couldn't do it. I tried, I went to school, I went to all the labs. I was really not happy with that. And I saw what looked like heaven to me, Valhalla, and that was a fancy restaurant, right? The one I first worked in, I knocked on the back door and took a non-paying job, what they call in kitchen culture, a stage or a stagiaire job, where you just show up and put on a chef's coat and do whatever they tell you. In my case, it was chopping shiitake mushrooms to make wild mushroom quesadillas, which were amazing, by the way. And I knew that this is where I wanted to be. I wanted to be in this place that was just so blissful for me. And also probably felt familiar because we had so many people around a table in our home. And that always felt like the best part of the week for me is when we had guests and we were having these dinner parties. So on I went to work in a kitchen in what at the time was one of the best restaurants in America. The chef owner there, Robert Del Grande, cooked on Julia Child's show and was one of her good friends, and won all the Beard Awards, like with the Oscars of the restaurant business, and did all the things. So that was a great place to really get serious about my education in restaurants.
And you did that when you were still in Houston, right?
Not in Houston. And I will say there was a year when my parents, our relationship is fabulous right now, didn't speak. It was
at all. They just shut down on you.
Yeah, it was just really too painful for me to communicate with them. And I had tried to share that this was my passion, and they really were adamant that that was not the right thing for me to do. So we had a year there where we just really didn't communicate, but we came back together after 1 year, and I'm really happy and proud. It takes some work, right? Family relationships can be hard. And now I think we're really great. And they don't think that which is what I think they thought, that I was just like pouring Diet Cokes for people, right? Like, what is a sommelier? We don't understand. When we go to a Chinese restaurant, there's hot tea, there might be some cognac in a teapot somewhere, but what's this wine thing? Can you actually make a career of it? Can you support yourself doing it, et cetera, et cetera? And, they
just wanted you to be happy. That's the thing. And I think a lot of times we try to please them because that they will think that it's happy, but we have to find our bliss
Yeah.
in our own way. Now, you are still very much still in fine dining and wine as an entrepreneur now, though.
Yes.
And so in a way, you've kind of moved into a second career that
Yes.
is based on the expertise of your first one. What has that transition been like for you? And I ask this question because you and I became entrepreneurs right around the same time. You were a little bit ahead of me.
Yeah, sitting at a bar at one of our favorite restaurants, just chatting about what we do, how we start these companies, how we leave these really prestigious positions that we had, but where we were listening to other people.
Pretty much.
Well, it was really interesting. I really worked every side of the hotel and restaurant business in my a few decades long career before I became what we're now coining sompreneur. I don't know how you feel about that, but that's new.
A sompreneur. I like
Somebody
that.
but it's kind of thank you. It's kind of a new thing. There aren't really many of us out there. Most people are like, I want to die on the floor pouring a bottle of Chateau Margaux, and my passion, my life is in restaurants. But I worked all the way through all the parts, from hostess to managing partner, to global beverage director in the Starwood system I think I had 20 beverage programs from like Dubai to Bora Bora and other places in between. And I just thought to myself, gosh, maybe it's time. And I think you had some thinking like this too. I've learned from some of the best of the best. I've done this at the highest levels, won the awards. Maybe it's time for me to do something where I'm making all the decisions, and maybe unfortunately also dealing with the IT and the copy machine, but being completely responsible for what I'm doing. And I'll also say, you sort of mentioned it, there were some challenging moments in the years leading up to my moving on to this sompreneur kind of thing, with people that were written about in the New York Times during Me Too and all the fracas with that in restaurants. And so I really just thought this is also an opportunity for me to do good for the world through having my own business and making my own choices.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And I know, I mean, and here's the other piece that and I remember these days kind of vaguely because it happened in such a rush, but it is something, right? It's something we talked about, like when the pandemic happened, especially we had both just started our businesses a couple years before that.
Yeah.
Finally starting to see some success, and then have the rug pulled out from under us. And I think you more so than I did, because your work and being a som and being in fine dining, like fine dining and food and beverage and hospitality writ large was in serious trouble during the pandemic. And and that's probably just one of the biggest challenges you've had with your business. But I do think our challenges define our businesses and our journeys as entrepreneurs. The people who say failing forward and that whole thing. What did you learn from either that particular challenge or any of the others that you faced? And do you have a system now for the bounce back?
Oh, that's great. Wow, what a great question. Well, the most recent choices then I think are the pandemic choices. And you were so gracious to join me in that journey. I just thought to myself, the only thing we can do now is something to try to make the environment better or make the world a better place. And in my case specifically, I was trying to help furloughed and laid off food and beverage workers. And I wanted to find a way. And I was inspired by Jackie and Danny, who started this happy hour where they would have unemployed bartenders come on screen and make drinks that nobody was tasting, but encouraged their regulars and their friends and their families to Venmo them tips to keep them alive, essentially. So I was really inspired by that. So you and I kind of embarked on this virtual boozy brunch, which was so much fun, where we sort of did the same thing, but added our twist on it. We brought friends who were experts in other things, like doctor of psychology and yoga person, et cetera, et cetera. And we had cooking and we had drinks and we had wine and we had all kinds of fun stuff. So I think what I learned there, because we did that, the first one was the week that Chicago shut down.
Yep.
So we were,
Because New York had, because Jackie and Danny had started it in New York. And the thing that was
right.
interesting about me, like as I watched it happen, because you are so gracious in the way I just helped you like get started, and because it was something for us to
It
do.
was everything.
But then my dad got sick and I had to like exit and, handle all of that at the beginning. And then I was just too devastated to do anything else. But the thing that I loved about how you actually created a whole new stream of business out of
I made
that.
a business out of it. Isn't that nuts?
Yeah. And so that's the thing. That's the thing I want to know. How did you figure out, because I'm sure you've had other challenges, because coming out of the pandemic has been just as challenging, I think, especially for hospitality.
Yeah.
But what did you learn from that pivot that helped you bounce back and help you move from that event that was done to help people into a money-making proposition? And then how has that informed your business since then?
I think there are a few things. I think you have to take inventory. I mean, that's what you and I were doing, sitting at the bar, trying to figure out what we're going to do next with our lives. Like, what are your skills? Maybe what are you best at? What are you great at? What can you sell? That's very important. A lot of people forget that, right? They think, I'm going to do this thing, but can you sell it? How are you going to sell it? Who are you going to sell it to? I think number two, after taking inventory, was like the fast pivot, right? We did it right away. We did it even before maybe Jackie and Danny thought like, okay, we can ask for tips, but we can sell stuff. And, a lot of people came to the same conclusion, but nobody did it as quickly as I did, that you sell boxes of things, right? You're a restaurant. What do you have? You got a bunch of food still in your pantries. You've got booze. How are you going to stay alive, keep your business alive, hopefully keep some of your employees going too? And that's, looking around and seeing what we could sell. So I'm like, what can I sell? I can sell myself as a fun, sparkle person on camera to cheer people up. And I'm also an expert in drinks and food and curating and putting together and producing an experience. And we can put that all in a box. So, Jeanne, as you know, I was shipping things to, Singapore. I've never sent a box for $3,000 before. Now I've sent many things. I mean, we were sending all the ingredients to make a tasting menu, and then having a chef on camera with either your live-in cook or housekeeper or whoever's there with you, your wife, yourself, and helping people to have their power real estate meeting, where before they would have all flown in on their private jets to one city to have this before. Now we taught them how to put the cameras together and have all the angles and have the food and drink and have a sommelier there with you. So you could still do this business transaction where you all look like you're sitting at a table together, or as close as we could get. So we did everything from shipping $3,000 boxes to other countries, to just sending, a little box with 3 ingredients where a big group of like Rice University alumni could get together for 45 minutes to make a drink together or make an appetizer together. And thus Rice alumni relations could continue to fundraise just by bringing people together and this kind of community and this kind of experience. So yeah, I had the biggest, most successful sales ever during those couple of years when that was the only way for us to get together, which is why I think Letty Teague, the wine writer at the Wall Street Journal, is like, all right, well, you're the global guru. You're doing it best. I think the other part from the inventory is that I have a lot of great relationships. So, Chateau blah, blah, blah is one of the few I was one of the few people they would allow to decant 2-ounce pours of their wines and send somebody who wanted to do something super luxe, like 5 vintages or 10 vintages of a very exclusive wine to have side by side, right? So we were really pushing it. We were doing the most luxurious, the most kind of baller versions of these experiences we could.
Right. But it's at the essence of it is that taking inventory, realizing that you had something to sell,
Yep.
and then leaning on your relationships for it.
Yep.
Now, what about that experience and from your experience in fine dining helped you to pivot out of that? Because there was another change when people
Well,
weren't doing virtual experiences anymore.
I
So
know.
it's like, as you know, your business has probably been different every year that you've had it because of this reason.
The circumstances have been different every year, and then there are wars, and then people
Yes.
are leery. I mean, since the pandemic, when it was like, okay, we just have to find a way to get people here so we can talk about what we want to talk about or sell what we want to sell. I mean, one of the ones I was most excited about was I worked for Dell. I did dozens of experiences for Dell salespeople where they're selling pretty boring stuff like cyber attack software, I guess it is, maybe. How do you get them to screen? And I'm like, well, let's do something where all the wines have something to do with the different types of viruses, like a Trojan attack. We did Greek wines. The fishing attack, we did wines from fishing villages, so being creative like that. But to go back to your question, I think, now we're dealing with a whole different set of circumstances, but there's a couple things. One, we have this tool now, right, where we can be together this way, and we know how to make that very powerful and very meaningful. And, as you know, I wanted to know from people like you who are pros in TV production, how do we not make this just feel like we're all on our cell phones? Like, what can I do from the production standpoint and the hosting standpoint to really make this the deepest, most powerful connection we can? And now this is a common thing, right? You can have a high stakes marketing activation or experience or event. I launched Vera Wang's Prosecco with her on a virtual live stream like this with national media. Now we do this. So it's that. And then we're also using these tools and bringing that into what we were doing before. We had an event in Brazil. It was a big pitch, probably for billions of dollars of business, or whatever. I'm not supposed to say that kind of stuff, but it was big. It might have been, but so what do we do? We have a dinner, right? You have a dinner when you're making a big deal or a concert or something. They always do both. There's like a music person and a food and drink experience as well. And so I recorded a video of myself interacting with the chef in Brazil and made a cocktail and talked about the wine pairings that we were doing with this North America, South America, partnering collaboration dinner. So they had me on a screen that made me look life size. And I was next to the chef in the room and we had a little banter. And now this is how we're doing it. And I think it's very powerful and interesting that we've gotten so good at that. So I've done dozens of videos now for clients like that, where it's a very high stakes pitch of some sort. And I'm a surprise at the beginning or surprise at the end. And they're making the drink there in another country that I created. But they're listening to me talk about it. They're watching me make it. And then all of a sudden it appears in the room in front of them in another country.
And the thing I love about that is that it's a way of acknowledging the reality of our current state of being and still integrating it into something we actually need and want as human beings.
Yeah, to be together. Yeah. So now there's all these ways, which is very cool. And we learned a lot of them during that terrible time.
Right. Yeah. The terrible time. We will always refer to it as such. Now, in a very literal sense, your work has always been about service. But I have also sensed in you that it has a deeper purpose, and you've kind of spoken to it in bits and pieces when you give these examples of the work that you've done. When you came and spoke to my class at Northwestern last year, you said something that has stuck with me. And I mentioned this to you before we started recording, but I want to explore it officially on the podcast. You talk about luxury in a very different way that even if other people think this way, you're the first person I've heard that put it this way: providing without asking, anticipating wants and needs before they're expressed, where it really is about creating an experience as opposed to something being of limited value.
Or transactional.
Yeah. Can you talk about that philosophy and what is so important to you about being of service to others?
Yeah. Well, I, worked at these temples, as you mentioned, where, we were always pushing and trying to find what else we could do. What else can we do to make them feel incredible, special, singular, taken care of, and all of that. So, I come from that kind of culture. Charlie Trotter, Meyer, Chef Gabrielle Kreuther, all the great chefs I've worked with like tons of Michelin stars. But from the front of the house perspective, I think we get more of the guest or the client, right? So, the chef cooks, the restaurateur makes a beautiful place, but now we have to use all of those tools and more, and in a luxury activation or experience that we're trying to create for a brand. So you have to think more than 360. Maybe it's 720. I don't know, but I think what makes me different maybe from another sort of like luxury producer that does tons of events for big brands is, I'm not thinking big, I'm thinking a lot smaller, right? So, you can hire a luxury production company to get you a big star, you want Lady Gaga or Ciara or whoever to come perform. And you're like, okay, the people who are buying my bag are just going to feel so honored that they got to come to this big concert and we spent $1 jillion on flowers. But I think for me, what it boils down to, and I've been giving this a lot of thought, I gave a talk about this to the Inspired Home Show just a couple of weeks ago. It's like the intentionality of it. A lot of people say that I'm a better producer of events because I think small, but like really small about every single detail. Like I want the name card to be letterpressed by a woman-owned letterpress business in Philadelphia called Sapling Press. And I want to make sure that every ingredient that goes in the cocktails, the Casa Dragones, the only woman master tequileria, I'm probably saying it wrong, but amazing, right? Or like 10-to-1 rum that's co-owned by Ciara. I want everything to be women powered, everything. I want the glassware to be women powered. I want my top to be women powered. I want my Jennifer Fisher earrings to be women powered. And so this is like a newer thing for me, but I think I've been doing it for a couple decades, really, just to think about every single thing. So like any part of the experience that touches you, if you're like, okay, I see what's happening here. These flowers are edible. They're from a farm that's local, just a few, miles away. This glassware, okay, I see that choice, this placemat, whatever it is, it should all feed into the brand story, right? Like I go to so many events that are not mine where, you can tell they bought the bar package, and that's maybe just like a representation of how people do things. You should never buy the bar package. It doesn't matter how much you spend. It's about, who you're spending it with, how you're spending it, and how you're putting everything together so that the whole thing just not reeks, but is like screaming in a good way. We're just trying to show you who we are. If it's a purse, if it's a bag, whatever it is, a wine, a spirit, a credit card,
But
a malware thing,
even down to the fishing. But the thing is that that's what I feel like the connection for you is with Fearless Authenticity. It's like this idea of connecting luxury to the brand, but like you just said, people seeing who they are and not only the brand, but the people who are connected with it. It's like, is it difficult for you or challenging for you to see all those different tracks of the authenticity journey that you're taking people through, or the luxury journey that you're taking people through the way they want to? Because that's a lot of different audiences to keep. Yeah, it's like, it's definitely juggling a whole lot of things at the same time.
Yeah.
And I would imagine that is that like the trick of it? Is that what you love about it?
I think that's what I love about the intricacy, like figuring out the whole Tetris game of it all, but it's 3D Tetris and it's so crazy. I think it's a little like you worked on radio, you worked on TV, you like have this academic side of speaking, like putting all that together. Like, I think only you could be what you are, Jeanne. Do you know what I mean? Like nobody has that combination of things. And I think I'm very lucky or crazy through that career that I chose and that that lineup of people I chose to work for, many of them for quite a long time. But all that had to come together to be able to put events and experiences together in this way, and particularly in luxury, because I knew what it was like, right? To stay at Blackberry Farm, to be, at the Ferragamo estate in Tuscany. So I got to see many different ways of conveying a luxury experience or the feeling of a brand or a brand DNA. So it's really fun for me now to fight for what, sort of my vision of what it should feel like to be a part of X, Y, or Z experience. So I definitely do it the hard way. You could definitely order the bar baggage, you know what I mean? But I'm always like, no, I'll just schlep all the spirits and tinctures and tonics and make my own syrups, and I'll just bring it to the venue. You know what I mean? They all think I'm crazy. I'm always rolling very deep. For a TV segment, I'm not just coming with a couple bottles and a shaker.
No. Listen, when Belinda Chang shows up, she shows up with at least 100 champagne glasses and makes her own champagne fountain and gets on a ladder and pours it from the very top. Ma'am, from the day I've met you, you have always. And the thing that's interesting is I still remember the event where we met.
Oh, yes.
At Chicago Gourmet. Mm-hmm. Yep. And I remember how your moment stood out. And the thing is that you've grown and changed since then.
Yeah.
What is the best piece of advice that you've ever received or given that has helped you get to where you are right now? Because the thing that I find interesting about you too is that you still collaborate. You talked about your relationships, but I don't even know if you gave it enough depth as to what it is, because the thing that I find interesting is that the same people that are in your network often are people that you've trained, not only the people who've trained you. Like a lot of times we think about how something flows from what we've learned from into somebody else, but it also flows back in a lot of different ways. Can you talk about best piece of advice you've ever received and how that happens, like up and down, and across?
Right. I'm going to go backwards. I'm going to do, I think, the best advice I've given to other people first. So as you alluded, I think we're just in this really great time of life. You and I are pretty close in age, and it's so fun now.
Wait, didn't you just have a birthday?
Yes, I did.
Okay. Happy belated, my dear.
Thank you. So, now I have all these proteges that are like quoting me in their bios, and I see magazine articles that have my name in it, not because it's an article about me, but it's because it's about someone who I've trained. So it's so fun to go around the country right now. I've got a protege in Charleston, many of them in New York City, of course, and like all these kids that I just remember when they were so little, they didn't know how to open a bottle of wine, now working in wine and spirits and in restaurants, managing grand hotels and that kind of thing. And one of them, who you might have met on Virtual Boozy Brunch, her name's Carrie Levins. She owns a wine bar in Westchester, like a really high-end one. It's fantastic. She told me that she just learned that the best thing to do was to write down everything I say. So if we need an ism, she's probably got it in some book that she still has on a shelf somewhere. But I will say, I tried as much as possible to manage all women teams. We had like the only all women sommelier team at the Modern. I had 6 women working on my wine team there, which was epic and just we're rare. I don't even see one now. But I think the best thing is to learn Excel.
Was that your advice? That's the best advice you gave people, was to learn Excel.
I taught everyone the Jedi nod. When you go to the table, you say, I'm bringing another bottle, right? You don't ask it as a question. You do it as a nod, and everybody has to nod back, right? Like, how about a Magnum for the next bottle, right? But yes, and what that means is not learn Excel, but it does mean learn Excel. I think it's about understanding that we're in business. So of course, you want to do good things for the world. Of course, you want to be a great person. Of course, you want to be a great leader. But I think you also have to understand that for a business to survive and all these people that you've hired and trained to survive, you have to make money. And, that's one thing that women are not the best at thinking about and talking about. So every time I had any kind of meeting or training with any of the people working for me, we were always looking at P&Ls. I was always teaching them, you have to understand what your impact here. And yes, you should know your worth. That's another one, a big one, but understand how you earn it and also how you prove that you're earning it. So I think numbers. Like, thank goodness I went to the Illinois Math and Science Academy and felt very comfortable with numbers. This is so important, I think, in career. So I've given a lot of advice. Apparently Carrie's got books full of it. But
I was just about to mention the math and science piece of it. Like, it's so interesting how you've used what you learned that didn't seem like it was connected to food and wine, but it apparently very much was. How long did it take you to figure out that connection?
I think, working at Charlie Trotter's was a very different thing because that's an owner operator who had money and wasn't so concerned about profitability. But the next interview that I had for the job I really wanted is like, what's your turn rate and burn rate for wines in the cellar and what's your cost? And, and I was like, I mean, if someone had given me some numbers, I could have figured it out for you. So it was at the next job where I just realized how important that was. And then also, like, when you're arguing for the raise, you better come with some numbers, right? Whether they're how many people are watching you or whatever, you need some metrics. Like, metrics are just really important if you want to, succeed and pay your rent. So, and then beyond that, buy a house and buy the next one and the next one. So I really think that that's important to me. There's some charities that also are like very involved in this, especially for women, like Dress for Success really focuses on numbers. There are these like math and STEM, for kids in school charities that are really important to me because I just feel like everybody could be more successful and live a better life, especially women. If there was more mathing.
I love, oh my God, Belinda, the full circle moment is so real.
There it is.
Okay. Now, what's the best piece of advice that you've gotten?
I will say that in my career, that James Beard Award that I won a million years ago, it was in 2011. And they called that the year of the women. The James Beard Awards was.
But there hasn't been one since.
No,
in your category.
One since. A woman of color winning in the drinks category, there hasn't been one since. So not in wine, not in beer, not in wine writing. I mean, it's horrible. So I won that. But before that, there were no women mentors for me, and not really like a mentor that I could really get down with and get close to. So, the men told me some things like, only give 75%, your 75% is someone else's 150. I think I really had to just be fearless and pave my way. So somewhere, someone out there sort of instilled that in me without intentionally instilling that in me. So
that's mama and daddy, girl.
Yeah, I don't think I've had an incredible piece of advice. I don't know. There's chefs that sat me down and told me like not to be so mean. And I was like, well, I'm not being, not to be a B word. I'm like, listen, I'm not being that. I'm managing the same way the guys you have on staff are. So I got lots of advice, but I don't really feel like any of it was great. I mean, maybe the only one came from one of the great women grand dames of champagne. And that was like, bigger is better in wine bottles. And other things, and always carry a bigger bottle of champagne than everyone else. Which
yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. I love all that so much. And you know what? Thank you for being honest about not getting advice, because I interviewed another woman for an event that I did. It was like a panel I did, and she said the same thing. She said that the reason why she is so committed to helping especially other women, but just other people in business, is because she never felt like she had one solid mentor who gave her advice that she needed, that saw her and gave her what she needed. So, and I think we need to acknowledge that having a mentor is really special. It's not easy finding them.
Yeah.
And it's about the right fit. And then sometimes, even when you find somebody who's encouraging, they may not have anything to add. And so I love that you were honest about that, because I don't know if we talk about that part enough.
Yeah. I mean, you definitely should spend, I spent time. There was one woman who was a director of operations at one of the properties I worked at, and she moved to Las Vegas, and I tried to reach out to her, and I'm sure my email got lost. You know what I mean? So I tried, Gina, I tried.
But you kept going. And that's what I love the most.
So I'm like, I'm just going to figure this out.
And you did. And you absolutely did. Okay. Now I'm moving into last little questions I ask people for the podcast. What is your proudest accomplishment so far? And this is a two-parter. Proudest accomplishment so far. And what do you still dream of doing?
I think the mentorship piece is the proudest. I'm now on boards of 2 companies that were founded by proteges of mine. So I'm so excited to see where those go and can go. So that has been just so fulfilling for me. And even though some of them didn't sort of directly tell me their thanks, I think when you show up in someone's bio, that's good. Yeah. So I'm excited for them to all hire me at some point because they're getting there.
There you go.
And then what was question number 2?
What do you still dream of doing?
Gosh, I would like to have a world where I don't have to search for a woman power version of something. I'm really, these days as I mentioned, I don't even want to wear a piece of jewelry, or like if there's a choice that's a great, high integrity, fabulous choice, that's a woman powered choice, I'm always choosing it. And my dream would be that every consumer would be more thoughtful and more intentional and really truly speak with their dollar. Because I think a lot of people just aren't thinking about, when you buy that brand of ice cream or whatever it is, they're just buying what's more delicious. And, the very micro version of that is when my friend says, oh, we went to that restaurant. I'm like, oh, you could have gone to, this is the woman owned one, this is the one with the woman chef. I really want a world where I can affect that more.
Oh, Belinda, that is so intentional. And I think it's not necessarily something that people see themselves having power to do. And I love that you are helping people to see that, because I don't know that I think we've been disinvested from how much power because we think just because we have little money that, because we don't have, as my dad would call it, deep pockets, we can't make a difference. But those our little dollars do make sense.
Oh, yes, of course. Yeah. I want to be a better person. I want everybody else to be better with me.
I love it. Okay. Last question I always ask everyone. When do you feel that you are at your best, truest, most authentic expression of you?
Oh, gosh. The best, truest. I think it's in the room at dinner. There's just something about the dinner table and being surrounded by a bunch of people who are spending this hour or this 3 hours, or in some cases, this 6 hours. I don't love to do that anymore. I get a little sore sitting for that long. But when people are just really in this moment together over food and drink, I think it's one of the most powerful moments there are on earth. And, I've seen so many magical things happen over a table. So that's where I love to be.
Belinda, you are a gift, my dear. I am so grateful to have tracked with you on my entrepreneurial journey. I don't think that was a mistake. And that's why, as I say, I nestled myself right in your wake.
We're like, let's do it.
Belinda, what did you do about this? Because this is what happened.
Fabulous. It's been a joy. It's so much fun. And we have so much more to do, Jeanne. We ain't done. We're not done.
We are not done yet, ma'am. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Thank you, Belinda, not just for that conversation, but for your support and friendship over the years on our entrepreneurial journey. I don't know what I would do without you on that. So let me pull out some thoughts and highlights from our conversation. I love how Belinda talks about the power in details when she talks about luxury, because it's not only something that we can apply to our own lives and business, but it also speaks to a larger truth. So when she talks about paying attention to every single detail, connecting that to everything that somebody touches in the experience, but also connecting it to the brand and its story so that everything supports it, that there's all these layers to it. I also, sidebar, love how she says she wants women powered everything. I love that phrase. But the thing that I compare that to is when we talk about storytelling, whether it's writing a book or making a film or a TV show or something, the more specific we get about our experiences when we're telling stories, the more universal it is. And it sounds like the opposite would be true. But I think when we get into the details, that's when we can see the larger picture and the essence of what we're trying to feel or experience. And that's what Belinda's creating in her events, the same way as what you would do when you're telling a good story. It's all in the details. I also love how she looks at developing or creating a plan for a business, understanding first what your skills are, what you're good at, what you're great at, but also understanding what you can sell of that. Because I think a lot of us make that mistake and we forget about it. Yes, we want to do this thing and put this out into the world, but can we sell it? How are we going to sell it? Who are we going to sell it to? And understanding all of that helps us to do that second piece of success, and that's the fast pivot. When we know what benefits we bring to people, then we're able to apply it to a lot of different situations. I use this all the time with my clients, whether they're entrepreneurs or not, because as she talks about later, understanding the math and the metrics can help us no matter what we do. And it helps us become more successful, whether it's work or life. I mean, she joked about it and saying the best thing you can do is learn Excel, but understanding that we're in business and we have to keep track of what we're doing, how we're selling. And that's not only how we survive, but we thrive, and make sure that the people we've hired or work with can thrive as well. I also love how she applies that to, and this is the phrase that I want to quote, arguing for a raise. Because a lot of times we call it asking for a raise, but we've got to make the cases for that. So all this stuff is applicable whether you have your own business or you're working a job. As she would say, it's important to be mathing. There has to be more mathing. And you know what? Another piece of that I love, it's a connection to her past in how she studied and what she started off studying and how she applied that to where she is now. And then bringing it full circle. And I think this is just as intentional as she is when she's creating an event, talking about her dream that all of us as consumers will become more intentional and speak with our dollars. I think a lot of us don't think we have power in our money because we don't have a lot of it, but we can speak with our dollars and spend it on things that really count, not only for ourselves, but for the people we spend those dollars with, the people we want to support, the people maybe who look like us that we want to support, or just areas, maybe it's a neighborhood shop or something like that. But we can really make a difference with the dollars that we have, and we should do that more often. Thank you, Belinda, for reminding us of that, for helping us see our power in the mathing, and also, once again, your friendship and advice, absolutely priceless to me. And you are also priceless to me, my Fearless Authenticity listeners. Thank you so much for your attention and your support. I would not do this without you. And you know I could not do this without my amazing production team. Thank you guys for all your hard work every single week. I do hope that you will rate, review, download, subscribe, share, do something with this episode wherever you get your podcast, because every time you make a comment or share it or just like it, it actually spreads the word to other people to get it too. And also make sure you do that on YouTube. I would also be honored if you joined my community. Sign up for my newsletter at fearlessauthenticity.com. That's where you'll find out everything that I'm up to, including episodes of the podcast. Please follow me on social media at Ms. Jeanne Sparrow is where you find me on YouTube, on Facebook, and on TikTok. And at JM Sparrow is where you find me on Instagram and X, the artist formerly known as Twitter. This has been Fearless Authenticity with Jeanne Sparrow. Thank you so much, and we'll see you again soon.